Hello, everybody. We're back with another episode of ColorPro Talks. I'm Phong Fennell. I will be your host and moderator for today. And I should lead in with an introduction. You are a world-renowned artist and illustrator, right? So,
and a nice guy. And a very nice guy.
and is an incredibly nice guy. And I do apologize for
My
that.
wife and kids definitely know.
And so you're best known, and you are really well known for your work with Star Wars.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we reached out to you. We know your work. We've been working with you for a few years. We reached out to you to create a original piece for us. We're ViewSonic. We have our golden finches. There's 3 finches. And so from there, you kind of just took it and did your own creative license on it, and it looks amazing. So we really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Right next to Cliff, we have Edward Hattenberger. He is the senior color scientist at Pantone.
Nice to meet you, Phong. Good to see you again.
Captain
Good to be
Color.
live.
Yeah.
Good to be live.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. We haven't had an event in years, so
Yes.
it's actually amazing to get to see you guys again. And then right next to him is a man that I've been working with for years. So this is Tom.
Yeah,
and,
I'm sorry, Phong.
No apologies offered to accept it.
No, I really appreciate it. Actually, it's been a fantastic ride. It's been a great relationship, and we really appreciate being here. This is a first for me to be here, and I have to echo Cliff's sentiments with regards to this event, as well as his creative intent, and what he can actually finally deliver is just phenomenal, absolutely beautiful. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, very
Thank
creative.
you. I completely agree. And then Tom and Ed are here to lend their expertise in just the science and the technology behind the color and Pantone and X-rite. Cliff is here for his wonderful, wonderful artistic eye, and so lend his creative touch and perspective on things. So really do appreciate you guys joining us today. To start off, Cliff, I'm pretty sure you get asked this a lot, but how did you start off? How did you know that art is for you, and how did you get started?
Well, I mean, and I don't mean this in a negative way, art wasn't necessarily encouraged in my home. I come from a very lower middle class home and blue collar family, and art was something you did more as a hobby. And so it wasn't really encouraged, but I did it all the time. It's the way I think, it's the way I tell stories, and I doodled. I got in trouble in school. I had teachers that encouraged it. I had teachers that got after me. Don't draw so much on your homework. But I was always a visual kind of person, visual communicator. Then I got married young, and I worked in the family business. And one day my wife said, this isn't really what you want to do. And my wife was a huge encouragement for me to pursue this artistic kind of talent that was in me. And so, if somebody told me when I went back to school at 24 that I would be a Lucasfilm illustrator, having done the Blu-ray covers and things like that, I would have chuckled and said, that's somebody else's dream. But you start at a certain point, and the beauty of a show like this is you get a lot of young people that want to do what you get to do. So you really have to humble yourself a bit and remember, okay, where was I at a certain point and not doing this, and where was I earlier in my career? So one of the things I like to tell young people is sometimes the best job is the worst job. Mm-hmm. And because it tells you what you don't want to do, and it motivates you to do something different.
absolutely.
And so that's where I was when my wife was talking to me about, hey, why don't you pursue this? And so I really kind of look at it as a team effort. My wife is working my booth right now, and she's just as sweet as can be. And so, one thing led to another, and it's about perseverance. You have ups and downs in your careers, and then you do reach a certain point of your career where, you're working on projects, and then you can start saying no to projects. And if I don't labor too long, one of the analogies is define your mountain. Okay, your mountain's here, okay? And that's where your goal is. And as you're young in your career, choices like this still get you closer to your mountain. But as you get closer to your mountain in your career where you really want to be and you still have these choices, these are no longer going to get you closer to your mountain or closer to your destination. Right. So when I used to teach, I used to put a dot on the board and put a line and say, okay, you're closer. So certain choices. So very early in your career, anything I did in the arts was still getting me closer to the mountain, but not anymore. For what you decide, what you really want to do as far as your artistic or illustrative careers.
Absolutely. And so, moral of the story, kids, is that follow your heart, do what you want to do, because all roads lead to wherever you want to do. Right? You went art. You went science. I don't know where you went. But, I mean, you were all
Actually, I was
But
one
he's
of
here.
Well, I was one of those. No,
He made it here.
I still don't know where I'm at. No, actually, you're absolutely right. You know, and I have the same, the conversations with my sons and my kids about that. I said, you don't know where you're going to end up, but figure out that point. And I love that
That's a great
analogy.
analogy, yep.
Perfect. Figure out your point in this. See how you can get there.
Yeah. And throughout a life, your points can change, and you can say, you know what, this isn't where I want to, ultimately, but at least you tried it.
Right.
Instead of kind of looking back going, I wish I would have tried that, And when I taught, I would tell students, in 10 years from now, when you see me in the grocery store or something, and I say, hey, how's it going? And, and you say, well, I'm not doing art. It's like, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking you how you are doing.
Exactly.
Not, it doesn't have to necessarily be in that particular path. But as long as you're finding a path and you're happy and you're moving, you're...
Find the passion.
Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, in your creative process, I want to narrow it down to a single piece.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the picture itself, it's called Joyride. It's on his website, cliffcramp.com. There's the robot is blue, it's silver, it's steel.
Yeah,
Grogu is green,
yeah.
he's blue, right? And then there's a lot of shadows. The building is very cool.
Right.
But then if you look at the picture itself, there's a lot of warmth, excitement. There's a lot of cheerfulness in the picture. Like, how did you manage that in a picture that's so blue, so green, so cool, so with that color temperature?
Well, I mean, as we drill down into color, everything tells a story. And even when I used to teach, it was every decision you make has to drive the story forward. Right. So if the color choices that you're making aren't driving the story forward as far as like scary color or, using certain greens for, a swamp thing or something, that you're trying to get a horror vibe. The old horror films where they they upshoot
from the shadow.
They have the great light, and then they put a filter on it, and it's just awesome stuff. That a lot of that's not being taught anymore, and that was one of the things I wanted to be very specific in my coursework is to communicate those ideas that vantage point tells a story, value tells a story, color tells a story.
Absolutely.
And so in that piece, there's so much color in that piece. It had to be, even though it's a chase scene and IG-88's firing off, his blaster and Grogu's sitting there with smiling and the ears. It's completely different than the first piece that Mr. Lucas purchased. The original was Storming Troopers, which was a D-Day scene. It's much more muted in color. It's desaturated. It's those kinds of things. And that was another one of my popular pieces. But color is really important, and that had to have kind of a happy feel because it's titled Joyride. Right. And so IG-88's firing off a blaster and hitting a stormtrooper. But you have to communicate those ideas of, and then bounce light and things like that, and especially like your camera guys here that that totally understand how you use a camera and how you use bounce light in order to illuminate certain things. You do that with as an illustrator, and I tell a lot of illustrators, look at really good film shots, and especially not the temperature of light, but the temperature of shadow. So if unfortunately we're just not real colorful. I forgot to wear color. I know, but
I know what
okay.
you're saying.
Let's say somebody's in this color shirt. So we're now you're our model.
Yes.
And then this color shirt here, right? So we've got these three colors. A lot of art, they would just add a little bit of white to that to give the highlights, a little white to this to give the highlights, a little white to this, and a little white. But if you do that, all of a sudden this is hit with a cool light, this is hit with a warm light, and it's the same scene, and it doesn't make sense, right? So you have to understand how light or color, the temperature of the light affects the surface of an object or a character in order to make it feel like it's unified in the same scene. And
Right.
and those are those were taught years and years ago, but I think a lot of that isn't taught as much anymore. That's why I love this relationship, because we're talking about color and how it affects story, and it's just so yeah, that had to be a real happy piece. So there's a lot of bright bounce lights and playing with warms and cools and things like that. So.
A little bit of a segue, but you kind of explained your thought process. But was that done in traditional acrylic, or was it was started in digital?
Well, I work in every medium. So I work in casein, I work in oil, I work in acrylic. Acrylic I've been working more in because of the fast drying nature of it. I prefer oil and casein. But my work can go, I can start digital and say, hey, you know what? I'm done here. I'm going to print that out and finish it out traditional.
That's interesting.
And I don't have to, so I have a high-end printer. I can print it out on really good archival paper. I mount it to panel or board, and I finish it out as a traditional painting. Sometimes I'm out, like especially when I lived in Southern California, and now I'm in the foothills in Boise. So there's different, I can paint the rivers and the mountains and things like that. I could scan now those in and use some of that analog texture. So one of my more popular paintings, like Storming Troopers, part of the lower part of the beach scene is actually a plein air painting that I did out in Laguna here, and I did a painting, and I thought, you know what, that section right there would look really good in this painting, right?
Little copy paste.
Yeah, well, and then you scan it in, and then you adjust the colors, you make sure everything's uniform, and it's like, hey, I got my traditional texture in there, but now it looks completely different, and nobody would really even notice looking at my traditional painting that it was part of this painting.
I've
So,
stared at that picture multiple times, and I've never even noticed.
yeah. It's one of those things where, I don't really like the divisions between analog and digital and all that stuff. It's just create a really cool image. So yeah, I start some things traditionally, finish them digitally, some things traditional all the way. A lot of my print market stuff is digital all the way, and then if it becomes a popular print, then I'll go back and paint a an analog version of it, so that the collectors that that buy the original are actually buying a true original, even though it's based off of a print that was really popular. So
That's interesting.
So yeah, it's kind of like, what do I feel like today? I always wake up and go into my studio and play with my ViewSonic monitor.
Sounds very similar, to Pantone.
Yeah.
And X-rite. We've had to take that whole journey
Yeah.
from analog to digital.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we've done is actually some of the work we've done with ViewSonic has been part of that, with doing the validation work on displays, so that we can provide a third party using real world colors
Yeah.
objectively.
Yeah.
And that's where Ed comes in, because he's the objector. No, he's not. He's the ruler. He's Captain Color.
He's Captain Color.
But he does all the he does all the analysis work, and he's the science guy behind color.
Well, and that's the one, I don't know if people realize this, but one of the cool things about Pantone is all the digital values for all the colors, they came from the real world.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like the fan deck, we actually take the fan decks. Well, the first printing, it can go into a long story, but you take the fan deck, you measure a color. When you take the measurement of that color with a measurement device, you can actually convert that into a specific color space, like sRGB. I don't want to get too up into the details. So that gives you the
Want to get
actual.
your whiteboard?
Oh yeah. Hold on.
Oh, hey, hang on a minute.
So
See, right here.
There you go. Oh, you know
that's
what?
that's the really
Hey,
cool
wait a
thing
minute.
about it is it's
Wait a second.
Yeah.
Let me see what we got. No, I'm kidding.
so you're getting and when you work with the Pantone color, there's a physical representation of it. Yeah. So if you're not maybe an illustrator, but if you're a graphic designer, an industrial design, a fashion designer, and you're working with that color in digital, it came from something you can order. I can order a Pantone chip. What is this going to look like in real life? This is what it's going to look like. So it came from that data.
And it actually reversed too, because now if you're working in the real world, that there's a digital parody.
Yeah,
Sure.
There's something
absolutely.
that can represent it. So if somebody comes home with an apple that looks amazing. You're like, that's the color red I want.
Right.
Or like a green granny apple, right? That's the color green I want. You're able to take that, translate it into a digital color. From that, you can then go and find, paint the wall green.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier when we were just sitting around and talking about the whole memory colors.
Yeah.
And being able to actually.
Ed, go ahead and put that up. So there's
ahead.
actually a tool. You got a tool for
so
that.
Yes,
we have a color card.
That's so cool.
And what you take this color card with the Pantone Connect app, and you can measure colors. So you could put it on any color that you want and measure it, and it'll map it to a Pantone color. So it takes you from this inspiration, like, oh, I really like that color. Well, I want to work within a Pantone, so it takes you into that space. So it's really cool.
Can you hold that up really quickly?
Sure.
I want to see how it works. So what happens is there's a notch cut out, and then
there's
all the other reference color around it.
Yeah. So
the app knows what those colors are.
Yeah, these are printed to a very, very tight tolerance. So we store the digital values, and we know what that color should be in real life. So depending, and that's where it gets really tricky. That's where the color science is, because the lighting can change all these colors. We know what they're supposed to be, so we can account for all that. Nice. So when we map to a Pantone color, we can account for knowing what these are in real life. We can adjust for the light source, and there's actually there's a few squares here in the middle that have round. I don't know if you can see them. They're round. They have like a little bump on them.
A little bit.
Yeah, they're bowed. So that can give you instant light information because it's a
Where it's
direct reflection of lights. You know what the light source is, so you can account for it. So it's really
nice.
This is a really cool card.
This one's for Pantone and X-rite. And why do colors look different on the computer versus my laptop versus my monitor versus my printer versus my ...
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that could be a number of reasons. Say you've got two. Yeah.
Dumb it down for me.
Well, yeah.
Me
So
too.
let's say you've got two displays, right? It could be just one is in a different color space. So there's different color spaces like sRGB, Adobe RGB. There's newer color spaces called P3. So you could have one that's in sRGB, which has a smaller color gamut, versus like a P3, which has a larger color gamut, or Adobe. So, and when you display those the same image, you'll get a different. You'll be like, oh, it's different. And, it looks less saturated maybe on the sRGB than it does on the other display.
So how would you work with that? So if let's say I had an older monitor or older computer, newer monitor, or vice versa, how would I control for that?
Color manage. So you have to
Calibrate it?
calibrate it.
Calibration and color management.
So you measure. You can.
Yeah.
We have software. One of our partners, Calibrate, has software that you can place a measurement device on the display. It'll flash a bunch of colors, and using that color information, it'll create something at the operating system level that knows how to communicate color. So if you color manage your display and you color manage your printer, and you're going from screen to print, you can actually do soft proofing. So you can say, okay, I can apply the ICC profile. Oh, I'm getting too technical, but you can apply the profile in like Adobe, say an Adobe app, and you can do a soft proof. You can convert to that, and it'll say like, oh, you'll see the color shift a little bit, and you'll be like, oh, I don't like that. As an illustrator, maybe you're like, oh, that red just lost a lot of pop, and I want to change a few other colors to account for that if you're going to print. Because if you don't color manage, what happens is you press print, and you're like, I don't like it. Then you go back and mess around. Then you press print, and you're like, oh, that didn't work. And then so you've just wasted a lot of time and money.
While we're there, this is a question for all three of you. Sure. Is there a checklist, top 3 things you guys want to look for when you look for not just monitors, but computers, printers, right? Like your personal equipment, to ensure that what you're getting is compliant, certified, whatever it is, that that it's reliable. Let's start with Cliff.
Well, I think for me, a lot of it is reputation. You guys have had a great reputation, and I don't know if I have a top 3. I'm so intuitive of looking at things just visually, and you're the science guy, I'm the visual guy, and I'm like, that's exactly what I want.
I don't know where we are in time, but I think we are getting pretty close. I have more questions, but I'm afraid we're out of time. So
good. Guess what? We get to have another session, guys.
Yeah. Let's do another one. So, Cliff, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Really do
Fong,
appreciate
thank
it.
you very much.
Tom.
Always, appreciate it, my friend. Yes. Cliff, thank you, man. Good to see you, sir.